I'm good enough to be on the basketball team, looking and just holding back tears. You know, you're like a 14-year-old boy. I played my whole football career terrified that I was going to get replaced. And I remember my initial reactions to some of these were just, what the hell? You can't talk to people like that, man. This is what some people say is a great path to success. Welcome back to the Imported Podcast with me, Nick Alfieri, aka Nalf. Today is a solo podcast. Last week I did a podcast with Lewis Bach, who I played with on the Straight Shell Unicorns. We had a really cool podcast, cool conversation. So if you haven't heard that or watched that, check it out. A little housekeeping. I am going to be, in the next couple of weeks, getting this podcast available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so you don't have to just watch on YouTube. However, I will ask, if you're not subscribed to this YouTube channel, please subscribe to this channel. I am trying to get this to 1,000 subscribers. It's an important milestone. So give me a subscribe there, and we'll also be getting out to Spotify and Apple Podcasts soon here. I know that's a lot more convenient for people. And I am going to be diving into some topics. Now, I decided, last time I did sort of a Q&A podcast, and I decided, I really enjoyed doing that, but I decided I'm not really going to do that very often or to the full extent here publicly on this channel. For me, Q&As are a little bit more reserved for my Patreon supporters. That's what I do. I do one of those monthly on Patreon, and so I'm kind of reserving that right to my Patreon supporters to ask me questions. So instead, you are going to get publicly just topics that I choose to talk about. If you want to ask me questions, you can go ahead to the Patreon, and I always answer those questions every month on Patreon. Okay, enough of shouting everything out now. I was asked to stop drinking so close to the microphone, and I think that's a good ask. I think that's an incredibly annoying thing, and it's a behavior I'm trying to change. All right, so basically what I've got here, I've got some topics that kind of came up throughout the week, either within conversations that I was having with other people or within my own head as I go on a walk through Schwabish Hall. So I decided to start writing down some topics, and the first thing that I wanted to talk about was an experience that I had in high school football and how it shaped me. Now, I did say that this podcast is not going to be just football, and it's absolutely not. But this first topic does have to do with football and lessons and life lessons. So you guys know that I retired from football this past year after playing for 18 years. And I was thinking back to my high school football experience. I played high school football at Jesuit High School in Portland, Oregon. It is known as, you know, the best sports high school in the state, has been for years. Really strong teams in every sport, men's and women's. Actually, in 2005 or 6, this school was ranked by, I think, ESPN or Sports Illustrated as the #1 sports high school in the United States for all sports. So really competitive sports high school, and playing football at Jesuit was always the goal. I remember going to Jesuit high school football games as a little kid. And at that age, you know, high school football seems like such an incredible high level of football. And it's so funny to look back now at high school football games because you'd be like, oh yeah, those are just high schoolers. But I remember being a young kid, going to those games with friends to watch them and dreaming of playing on the field at Jesuit High School someday. And my football career there, I think, really shaped a lot of the characteristics in who I am as a human today. So freshman football there, this is where, you know, school starts in September, and all the freshmen come in August and start doing workouts with the team. And this is where you start to meet the guys that are going to be your teammates and friends in high school. And everyone's, you know, trying to figure each other out. Everyone's trying to figure out where they fit in. And also it's quite competitive because on the freshman football team, you know, I don't know, there's probably 100 kids that came out to play on this football team. There's probably 90 or 100 people that ended up being on that roster. So it was super competitive. And I had grown up, you know, in a football family, and the previous 2 years I played football and was a starter. And when it came to freshman football at Jesuit High School, I was a backup. I never really got on the field, and that was a really heartbreaking thing. But at this time in my life, I was also a little bit more focused on basketball. So in the fall is football, in the winter is basketball. And so I had freshman football in the fall, did not go well. I did, start to make friends, some of these friends that would be my good friends in high school. But the football season was not successful for me. I was a backup. I was on the bench, something that I was not used to. And so it was really difficult for me. However, I always had basketball to look forward to because in my mind, I was really a basketball player first. Football was sort of my secondary sport. So even though that was quite devastating in a sense, I always knew that, okay, at least I still have basketball. But then came basketball tryouts after the football season. And after, I don't know, maybe it was 2 or 3 days of basketball, I ended up getting cut from the basketball team. And this was heartbreaking. This was one of I remember looking at the sheet where they, you had basketball tryouts for 2 days and they put the names of the people that moved on to the next round that were still in play to make the teams, and going down the list and seeing, oh, my name is not on there. And there's like, oh, I had to be a mistake. No, I'm good enough to be on the basketball team, looking and just holding back tears. You're like a 14-year-old boy, all these people around you, high five, and yes, we made the team. And I'm just, oh. And I remember exactly where I went to this other parking lot. And it was just a heartbreaking thing. So the start of my high school career, football went horribly, basketball went horribly. Not good. And I mentioned this before, probably more on Patreon Q&As, but then after that is when I really started to get serious about working out and training my body. We had this athletic club 2 miles from my house that we were members of as a family. And, in the winter there, I got cut from the basketball team. Maybe that was December. I was first so sad and then so furious and mad. And then I started to work out every single day. I would ride my bike. It was pretty, kind of far and a really tough uphill ride to the gym, work out for hours, lifting weights, and then ride my bike back home. And I'd also play basketball at the gym too, like pick up basketball to try and, continue working on my basketball skills because I was going to make the team the next year. Then, this maybe 6 months or so, 6 to 8 months, football season comes around, my sophomore football season, second year. And I was still pretty upset about how football had gone the previous season. But like I said, it wasn't my main sport. And I was just going out again, this year, not on the freshman team, but on the junior varsity team. Excuse me. And football was, I was just giving it a shot again. I thought, this was going to be my basketball year. I trained all year. I worked out so hard in the weight room, got big and strong, practiced basketball every day. But football rolled around, and all of a sudden, this, I'd been working out in the weight room and running sprints and doing all this stuff for my body. All of a sudden, I was much better at football than I had been previously. And I made my way into a starting role on the JV football team. I shared a starting position at cornerback. And even to share a starting position at Jesuit on the JV team, it was a big deal. I remember I was like, oh, wow, I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it. And I felt like I had come so far from where I was a year ago. And that sophomore football season was reasonably successful for me. I played cornerback. I rotated each series with the other cornerback, Michael Link, and finished the season. And then it came to be basketball season. And after that sophomore football season, though, I had unexpectedly really fallen in love with football. Now, I went to basketball tryouts still because that was my original goal. And I went to the basketball tryouts after having been cut the previous year, and I busted my ass, and I played really well at tryouts, and I made the basketball team. Not the good team, but one of the teams, the JV2 team, which was still quite an accomplishment for me. And and I was on that team with some of my friends, and it was a really cool, great experience. Actually, some of my best friends were on that team. But it's, I played through that season realizing, oh, I'm a football player now. So it was just, the point of this is how kind of responding to the adversity of getting cut from the team and going all out and trying to better myself ended up leading me not exactly to the goal that I thought I would get, become a strong basketball player, but it led me to a different goal. And this being a football player, and this happens so often in life, I feel like the plan we have for ourselves or the accomplishments we set out to go after, it doesn't necessarily work out the way we envision it, but it works out the way that it's supposed to be. So from that point on, I was a football player. I had battled through this adversity of the freshman year, and I'm coming in junior year. This year is on varsity. Varsity is the top team at the school. It's for the older kids, juniors and seniors, and this is, legit high school football. And I somehow earned my way to being a starter as a junior at Jesuit High School. And this was probably the peak of my, so far at this point, of my accomplishments at Jesuit High School, is becoming a starter as a junior on the football team. Had the first game, Friday Night Lights, coolest experience. I dreamt about this as a little kid growing up. There I am on the field, running out, playing in the game, played solid. And we win the game. And then the next game, I messed up quite badly on a couple coverages. And my coach screamed at me. I don't get in the details of like what exactly the coverages were and what I was yelling back at the coach, but I talked back to the coach and I said, that's actually not my responsibility. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And he did not take well to that. This coach is a legend in Oregon, Coach Ken Potter. And he did not take well to that, and he benched me. And I was benched for the rest of the season. So I had gone through all these ups and downs and made it to the starting spot as a junior, only to have it taken away from me after 2 games. And this, I think, this played such a role in how I approach football in life for the rest of my life so far, because I had my position taken away from me. I was replaced. And from that point on, I was always terrified of being benched or replaced in sports, even through college, where I was a 3-year starter and I ended up being the captain in all league at my school. And looking back now, I was never going to get benched, but I went into every single practice terrified that if I didn't have the best practice and perform well and go to the best of my abilities, I was going to get benched and lose my spot again. It was ingrained in me that if I don't go 100% and perform at the top level of my skills, I'm going to lose my spot. And this, I didn't really realize this until now that I'm done playing football, that I played my whole football career since that moment at Jesuit where I lost my spot and was replaced. I played my whole football career terrified that I was going to get replaced. So at Georgetown, I always thought I was going to get replaced every single practice. I played and practiced like I was going to get replaced, like my job was on the line. And this is why I practice so hard. Same thing out here in Germany, which is ridiculous to think that I was going to get replaced and benched. I'm one of the handful of paid professional players on the roster. And I'd go into those practices thinking that if I don't have a great practice, they're going to try and replace me. That's what happens if you don't have a great practice. So it's interesting now to look back at that, seeing that I think I was motivated by fear of being replaced throughout my entire football career. And this is why when I would have one bad practice, like I was known for practicing really hard, I once made a YouTube video early on in my YouTube career talking about how much I love football practice and how important football practice is. Most people live for the games, play for the games, but I felt like I would make my mark consistently in practice. And it's interesting to look back and realize I practiced so hard and was so intense in practice all the time because I was afraid that I would get benched. Up until even last year, age 30, every single game I'm thinking, someone's on my heels, someone's trying to replace me. And it's just interesting to look back and realize that's what was going on with me the whole time. And it's so funny. I went out to dinner with Jordan, Coach Johnny, Cody, Ale, Mike. I went out to dinner with them on Friday. And we talked about Ale and we joked about how Ale and I got in these really intense fights on the field, and Jordan recalled some of these moments where we had scrimmages early on in the season, where the stakes were really quite low and we're just starting out as a team. And I'm freaking out and screaming so intense as if it was the fourth quarter of the German Bowl, because for me, in my mind, it was always on the line, everything. And it's just like, I think that was kind of a great thing for me. It was a great motivator. And I think I really improved at football because I practiced so hard. And I mentally I'd be nervous for practice. Every practice, I was nervous for practice, for team, for our scrimmages, because I felt I needed to play at the top level all the time and never let up. And I felt like I was being chased. I was running away from that for 14 years since age 16, running away from being replaced. And that was a big motivator for me with my football career and really drove me because of what happened at age 16, where I got replaced because I had a couple bad plays. And then also I kind of talked back to the coach, but I never wanted to have that again. And so I made sure that I was never in a position where you could even consider to take away my job. And that's what motivated me. Quite interesting. So yeah, I was thinking about that a lot this week. Kind of rambled on there a little bit, but yeah. Other topic that I wanted to talk about. I was talking with my girlfriend Laura. We're switching gears here a little bit. That was more of the football world. This is a little bit more of the culture world. Talking with my girlfriend Laura, who's German, about interactions and behavior between Germans and Americans. If you watch my main YouTube channel now, if you know how I talk about this American friendliness, this polite smile at your face behavior, and this German bluntness, very direct, what Americans would consider rude behavior very often. Just sort of the way that German people interact sometimes. They don't sugarcoat things. They'll say something very direct and curt. And to the American mind, who's uneducated on the subject, it feels offensive and rude. And I remember my initial reactions to some of these were just, what the hell? You can't talk to people like that, man. You can't talk to people like that. And Laura and I kind of came up with this theory, or I guess was sort of my theory, that in the United States, and you know what also tipped the scales for me to think of this is how quickly and aggressively I got honked at, or very often get honked at when the light turns green. If you're not peeling out right the second the light turns green, people in Germany will just lay on the horn, boom, 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 over and over. So rude and aggressive immediately. And I say, you don't really do that as much in the United States. And my theory is there's always more of a threat of violence in the United States. People in Germany are not really worried about getting punched in the face or somebody whipping out a weapon in case of an altercation. And so these interactions in Germany, they escalate. They're immediately escalated to the point of what I would call rudeness right away, because people aren't thinking or worried, hey, oh man, this could escalate into a violent situation. Whereas in the United States, people are so kind of surface level friendly to people. And when they're interacting with people, they handle it carefully and smiley, even if they don't really mean it. Perhaps because there's always a threat that somebody in the United States is going to punch you in the face, or a situation could escalate to where somebody pulls out a gun or a weapon. And I thought that this was an interesting thought, that the lack of threat of violence has led or contributed to how people interact with each other in these two countries, because the interactions between people are so different. And I thought that was an interesting theory. I wonder if that has anything to do with it. Because you think what really made me think that was when I got honked at like that, I thought, man, I would not do that to somebody in the United States, because that's instantly an escalation. And you always hear about these stories of road rage where people honk and then slam on their brakes and the guys get out and one's got a gun and boom, boom. And all because somebody immediately started the interaction off with an escalation. And that was something that kind of came into my mind. So I wonder if that's true at all. I love thinking about these sort of possibilities of why there are different cultural behaviors in different countries. So I know I've talked about Unicorn Town, my documentary, quite a bit, but I just was on a podcast with this guy, Todd Durkin. He's a really cool, intense dude. He's a trainer. He trains a bunch of NFL players out in San Diego, and we had a cool conversation talking about the process of making Unicorn Town. And you should check out that podcast with him. It was really, you can check it out on Spotify. Really enjoyed that. But it was made me think so much about the process of making that movie and the process of seeing a goal through to the end. That's probably one of the things I'm most proud of myself in recent memory, is seeing that project and goal all the way through the end, 7 years sticking with it through ups and downs and a bunch of hardships and a bunch of no's and a bunch of doors slammed in my face and a bunch of days and nights of feeling hopeless, and sticking through to it all the way to the end and getting across the finish line and accomplishing what I set out to do 7 years before. And I was thinking a lot about why I was able to do that, because when I talk to people about the process of that, that's one of the main questions they have for me or typically intrigued by with that story is how did you stick with it the whole time? Because you know how us humans are, we have so many ideas and goals, and so many people make goals, New Year's resolutions, and say, hey, this year I'm going to do this, or I'm setting out to do this, or I'm starting a YouTube channel, and people start off strong and then they flutter and then it just fades away. This is such a common thing. Actually, you know what I recently read is that human beings get a similar hit of dopamine from telling people about their goals than from actually pursuing them and taking steps to achieve them. So somebody said, hey, be careful about telling people about your goals or what you're going out to do, because you trick your brain and you get a little hit of a reward dopamine just by telling people, hey, I'm actually planning on making a documentary. That gives my brain a hit of dopamine and a sense of accomplishment that could then replace the actual effort of doing the task. And so I recently read that, and I thought that was quite interesting. I'm not entirely sure how scientifically accurate that is, but it does seem to make sense. And so, but the thing is, I told a lot of people at the beginning of Unicorn Time, oh yeah, I'm making a documentary, man. Yeah, I'm making a documentary. And, it gives you the hit of dopamine and makes you sound cool. And, oh, Nick's making a documentary. That's cool. But I was still able to see it all the way through to the end. And I think trying to realize or think of how I was able to do that. And I think there are a few reasons. One was I was really instilled from my parents early on to never give up. That was one of the main lessons I always remembered. I remember sitting in my dad's car before a third grade or fourth grade basketball game. And he's showing me a song that has really inspiring lyrics that basically the message is never give up, never surrender, keep going until you finish. no matter what happens, no matter if you're in pain or it's hard or it's difficult or it's not exactly how you thought it would be. And this was ingrained in me from, age 8 or 9. And I took that so to heart. And I remember, playing my basketball games like that as a little kid. Even if we're losing by a lot, I'm never giving up. I'm still playing hard to the very end. I'm not going to quit. And I think having that instilled in you by your parents at a young age, that was just deep down in there in me. Like, even when the process got so difficult and so hard, it was not even a question like that I'm going to quit. I just felt, okay, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep fighting through until we get there, no matter how long it takes. If it takes 10 years, it takes 10 years. It took 7, but we did it. So that was one thing I think really helped, having that lesson instilled to me by my parents. 2 was sort of making trying to keep true to my word for myself, not for other people. Like, through that whole process of making the movie, so many people were kind of, whether they were joking or serious, and, oh, that's bullshit. You're not making a documentary. No, you've been working on that for years. That's never going to come out. You failed, man. You can't do it. And that actually never really annoyed me. What annoyed me was myself thinking that and questioning myself, like, are you going to do it? You set out to do it. Are you going to do it, or are you going to quit? And that internal dialogue with myself of wanting to prove myself right and make true to the promise I made my 23-year-old self, that was a super strong motivating factor to not give up. And then the third thing I would say that helped me get all the way through it was I was doing something that I really loved to do. I really enjoyed doing and was passionate about. It was filmmaking and football, a combination of my 2 favorite things. And to be able to work on a project, also, it was a very personal project. So to be able to work on something that had all of those elements in it, it's really helped me stick to it. They say, the man who loves walking will walk further than the man who loves the destination. And I think that's so true. Even though I was in love with the destination of this, I was also in love with the walk. I was making a movie, and that's why I was willing to spend, days in a row, months in a row, years in a row of working on the same thing over and over again, because it was something that I loved to do. And I really like that quote that the man who loves walking will walk further than the man who loves the destination. I think that's important for all of us to kind of keep in mind, is that, it's so cliche, but it's like, if you enjoy the process and not focus on the outcome will be better because you're focusing on the process. So cliche, overused saying, however, it is so true. And so those are the things that I think really helped me stick to that. And I was thinking about that because of the podcast that came out with Todd Durkin. And it's kind of fun to think about. This is an interesting one. I was talking to Laura about this also. And it is this phenomenon that people used to look older, or did people used to look older? You go back and you look at pictures of people if I look at a 30-year-old in 1970, this person looks so much older to me than I look or my friends and peers look today. And the question is, did people actually used to look older, or is there some phenomenon explaining this? And I saw an interesting theory or attempted proof that no, people did not necessarily used to actually look older, but our perception of them is that they look older. And this has to do with the clothes that they're wearing. People in 1970 had a certain style, and they're wearing these clothes in these pictures. And now this style stayed consistent with this generation, the style of clothes, and it's similar to the style of clothes they wear today. So in our minds, like my mind of a guy born in 1992, this certain type of outfit is associated with older people's clothes my grandma or grandpa would wear. But back in 1970, this was just the normal clothes that a 30-year-old would wear. So as style progressed with people throughout the years, the perception changed. And so when people look at a photo of me wearing this outfit and they look at it in 40 years, this style of clothes will then be associated, I'll probably be still wearing this style of clothes, and this style of clothes will then be associated with a 70-year-old or an 80-year-old. And in their mind, I'm going to look way older than their friends and peers at age 30. I don't know if I explained that well, but I thought it was a really interesting thing because I always think, man, I look at photos of, my grandparents and at age 24, I'm like, he looks 40. And I guess it's probably due to the clothes. I don't know. Thought it was interesting. That was something I was thinking about on my walk. What else we got on here? I've been watching Yellowstone. Laura and I have been watching Yellowstone on Paramount Plus. I absolutely love it. And the creator of the show has a great, interesting story. Taylor Sheridan. This dude's actually like a pretty legit cowboy. And he was trying to be an actor and was kind of working as being an actor for 20 years or so and never really broke through. And then he decided, when I don't know, maybe he must have been in his 40s when he decided, I'm just going to try and write something then. And then he started writing and his career just took off. He's been wildly successful. He has Yellowstone. He's written a good handful of movies. He now has multiple TV projects in with Paramount Plus. Yellowstone has 2 spin-off shows, I think 1893 or 1899 and then 1923. I'm butchering the years, but these are spin-offs of the Yellowstone show. But I think it's so cool that he found this success so late in life. I feel like we always think, I love looking at those charts that show when certain successful people started their successful venture. And it's like, I think they always say, Morgan Freeman didn't start getting big as an actor until he was in his late 40s or early 50s. And there's a bunch of examples of this. People who didn't write their first book until they were 45 or 50. And this example with Taylor Sheridan, I think, is really cool because it just goes to show that it's never too late. It's never too late for doing what you want to do. And I find that to be super inspiring. Also, I absolutely freaking love his shows. Yellowstone is so great. Makes me want to move to Montana. He also has a couple movies that he wrote. Hell or High Water is one that I can highly recommend. It's such a tight, just not an ounce of fat on that movie. It's so consistently suspenseful and entertaining and just a very well done movie. Hell or High Water, can highly recommend that. And then another one that he wrote was Wind River with Jeremy Renner, about a mystery that takes place on a Native American reservation. He always writes with sort of these themes of kind of Western United States, cowboys type stuff with Native Americans and their relationships and how it all works. And this seems to be stuff that he knows, he truly knows. And so he does a great job writing with them. So, but yeah, I just thought it's always inspiring to hear stories like that where somebody is trying, for 10 or 20 years to accomplish something. And then, maybe it's not working out. And, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Maybe it's not going to work out exactly like you thought. Taylor Sheridan thought he was going to be a big time actor, but no, pivoted a little bit, kept working, and boom, he's one of the most successful writers and show creators working in television today. And yeah, it's very inspiring. So let's not forget, it's never too late. Never too late. And there's something, I think like Colonel Sanders started Kentucky Fried Chicken when he was like 80. I always think that these are really cool. Christopher Nolan movies. Guys, I was thinking about Christopher Nolan movies. I stumbled upon some random YouTuber's live stream this week, and he had 2 viewers, and I just clicked on him. He was talking about movies, and I actually sat there for about 25 minutes, and I wrote him some questions, and we kind of went back and forth in the live stream, and I asked him about Christopher Nolan movies, and I really like the way that he spoke about movies, and so I subscribed to him. But anyway, I got started thinking about Christopher Nolan movies. This is my favorite movie director, and I've said this on Patreon Q&As before, but the way that he blends art with a commercially viable product is just so great. I think he's one of the few directors that really, really does that well. I mean, the fact that he had movies like Interstellar or Inception, these are original ideas, original screenplays, not some franchise, not some superhero, not something with a built-in intellectual property that you have a built-in audience for, but original thought stories. I mean, that's just that's such pure art. And then to make these movies and have them make, I don't know, like, what did Inception make? I feel like Inception made $1 billion. Let me see. It's so impressive, Inception film. And it's something that I really admire Christopher Nolan for, is to be able to blend the two. And I was, 836 million Inception made against a $160 million budget. Pretty good profit. But his movies, I mean, geez, there's some that are so underrated. I think The Prestige, actually, if you watch the YouTube video I made 2 years ago where I talked about my top 10 favorite movies of the 21st century, Dunkirk and The Prestige were on the list. And The Prestige I had pretty high, and I would stand by that today. I think it's probably his most underrated movie. And it is so smart and so sharp. It's just, man. And I read a Christopher Nolan book a few years ago about how short on budget they were for that movie, how limited they were production-wise. It's a movie that takes place in Victorian-era London, but they shot it in Los Angeles, and you would never know. But they were so creative with the limitations that it ended up serving the movie, and they found out creative solutions that they otherwise wouldn't have been forced to. That's a great, interesting point, I think, is sometimes the best creativity comes from limitation or lack of resources. It forces you to find solutions. What is that saying? Necessity breeds innovation? What is it? I got to look at this saying. Necessity breeds innovation? What is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's great. Okay, said by Plato. Yeah, so Christopher Nolan movies, I mean, there's just, obviously, the Dark Knight trilogy, phenomenal. His early movie, Memento. The Following, his black and white movie, his first one that he made when he was about my age. He made it at age maybe 28 to 30. And he shot it with his friends on the weekends in black and white. And it ended up being like a movie that they actually sold it and got distribution, and this really kickstarted his career. But I really admire the story of him just bootstrapping that movie and just making it happen. Something original that he wrote, and he didn't have resources, and he just made it happen with his friends and what he could scrap together. And it made for a really creative, unique story. And then after that, he got a little bit of recognition. He was able to make Memento. Awesome movie. If you haven't seen that, check it out. Then after that, I think he did Insomnia. So this was his first one where he had kind of a big studio backing him, and he had the pressure of a big studio, and he hit. That was a great, great underrated movie with Al Pacino. It takes place in Alaska. Very cool movie. And I think then he started doing the Batman movies. But I really admire how he sort of blends. It's clear that he's a student of science and a student of history. If you take a look at, and also, of course, a student of film, you take a look at movies like Inception or Interstellar or Dunkirk, or now his new movie that's coming out, Oppenheimer. I mean, this is a man who is clearly interested in science, clearly interested in history. And this kind of brings me to my next point of being a generalist over being a specialist. Now, this is not appropriate for everybody, but it's something that I, as a filmmaker and aspiring filmmaker, think is important, is to be a generalist. To be able to sort of combine, and what I mean by that is, they say a jack of all trades, a master of none. Have a bunch of different interests and things that you know about and are competent in. Perhaps you're not in the top 1% of one category of something, but perhaps you're in the top 10 or 20% of 2 or 3 categories of something. And this is an interesting idea. This is what some people say is a great path to success. Because if you're able to sort of cross-pollinate interests by being a generalist and not only having expertise in one field, but having a general knowledge of multiple fields, you'll be able to cross-pollinate things and try different things and combine different ideas that somebody who's only an expert in one field wouldn't be able to do. And I don't know, I find this to be a quote I've heard is, don't be the best, be the only. And it's something sort of that I'm trying to do. I'm the only former professional football player in Germany that does YouTube about cultural comparisons, but also does feature films, but also has an interest still in football and history, and sort of combines all of these to make a solo path that's only I'm on. It can be very specific, but my goal is to be the only version of someone that does all these specific things. So they say, don't be the best, be the only. Create a monopoly. This is sort of being an exaggeration, but create a monopoly for what you do. Or get yourself on a monopoly path by combining different interests and skills. And I got a little bit off on a rant there, but it was because I think Christopher Nolan is quite a generalist in that aspect. Of course, he is, I would say, a little bit of an expert within the filmmaking, but because he has interests in these other aspects of life, he's able to make to combine, like Interstellar, to combine science and filmmaking in that way is just an incredible thing. Somebody that wasn't truly into the science and the physics, you couldn't make that movie. And so, I don't know, I think being a generalist is a valuable thing. And maybe it takes a while to find out the perfect intersection of your skills or interests. Maybe it's not clear at first. Maybe it feels like these are never going to intersect and I'm never going to find the perfect thing for me to do. I should have just been an expert in one thing. But maybe someday they do cross perfectly and an opportunity comes together exactly for a person of your combination of interests and skill sets. Yeah. I'm rambling a little bit about it, but I do like that idea. I'm a fan of being a generalist. This is how I would describe myself as a filmmaker. I am not, in terms of filmmaking, I am not an expert at one thing in filmmaking. I would say I know generally about every aspect of filmmaking, from lighting to cinematography to writing to editing to scoring to music editing to graphics to, you name it. Because of Unicorn Town, I learned it. Now, I would say that there's some disciplines that I'm a little bit deeper in, closer to an expert in, but overall, I'm a generalist when it comes to filmmaking. And I think that's good for a director to be able to, because when you're a director, typically on a traditional movie, you have people that are the head of each of these departments, and you go back and forth between them, and you coordinate and work with these experts of each department. But you being able to have a general knowledge of each department and each discipline within filmmaking helps everything work cohesively, and you can kind of glue it all together. And that's why I think they oftentimes say that they would like, you want a film director to be more of a generalist than an expert, because you have your experts in each category. I'm talking about random things here today, guys, for sure. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, no. What else is on my list? Yeah, guys, that's kind of all that I had that I wanted to talk about today. No, I have a few other topics, but I'll probably talk about those next time. And yeah, that's fun. I like doing that. What we did about, what is that? 47 minutes, 45 minutes. That's pretty good, right? All right, guys. Like I said, this stuff will be soon available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please give this channel a subscription. If you are so inclined, I appreciate you, especially if you're watching all the way to the end right here. If you're watching all the way to the end of this podcast, thank you very much. Your attention is valuable, and I appreciate you sharing your time with me. Hopefully I could make 45 minutes go by a little bit faster while you were doing something else. And I will see you guys on the next one. See ya.